Sean, stop right there. Sean, stop right there because I have to ask you a question. Because you said you made a general statement saying that things were passed down to you by your ancestors, saying that they were some stolen Africans, right? Hold on, Sean. Hold on. Let me ask you a question, bro.
Asked me about
you about to make me lose my train of thought. Hold on, bro. So slow down.
Asked me about documented evidence.
So hold on, bro. Slow down. The documented evidence. Gotcha, right. So who in your family gave you this alleged documented evidence? And shout out to Wanagi because he showed us a clip that most African Americans cannot find an enslaved ancestor like that when it comes to genealogy because they weren't documenting slaves like that.
No,
how's it a lie? This is coming from Henry Louis Gates.
Brother, I can tell you, I can take you right now to Old Hickory Boulevard where my great grandmother grew up at and show you the fucking land where they sat on with a white man last name Williamson owned they motherfucking asses and they tilled the land right there.
Did he mark down what place in Africa y'all came from?
And I can take you and show you the
hold on, brother. Hold on.
With the 18
did this master document what part of Africa y'all come from?
I don't deal with these storylines.
Hold on, this is not Steve. Did your ancestor? You could be an Indian, nigga. You could be an Indian in that territory for all I care. I'm not running anything. I'm not running. I ain't ducking. I ain't running shit.
Provided me with evidence, nigga. Like I said,
Sean, shut up. Listen to my question.
Tyrone. The first thing about that source was a dead giveaway. It ain't have no author. On top of it, everybody that was saying that wasn't nobody qualified, brother. Nobody, we didn't see their credentials. We don't know.
So, hold on, YK, slow down. So the census takers did not have credibility?
Listen, bro, I was quiet. Let me just say a couple things and I'm gonna go back on mute. I already debunked that article a long time ago, brother. If you go to my channel, it's there.
What article?
The one that y'all pulled up about the DNA.
What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop's Own TV, and I know y'all heard that shit going on. Now, I'm gonna take y'all to class today. But before I do that, I want to give a shout out to Mossy Warrior. This is his content, and if y'all want to learn more about African history, especially in the Americas, go check this brother's page out. Once again, it's Mossy Warrior. The brother got some great content, and he provides a lot of documentation, a lot of historical, accurate documentation when it comes to our ancestors' experiences and just historical accounts. He provides a lot of information on that, and it seems like he does that daily or weekly. So, I suggest y'all go to his page, subscribe to his page, and give him a listen. All right, but I wanted to use this this video right here to really draw home how disingenuous these Pretendians are. And I'm gonna really break this shit down. So y'all bear with me. But before I get to the topic of historical context, because this cat right here, who goes by the name of Tyron, AKA Sean P's evil twin, he's a Pretendian, by the way, but he throws out this term historical context quite often in his argument. He wants people to know that you have to have the historical context. Because I guess his historical context is that we are not African, but we are Aborigines. And he has historical context to back that up. Okay, well, before I get to the topic of historical context in relation to African Americans' genetic connection with Africa, I wanted to address three things that annoying ass voice Negro Tyron said in the video. So let's get to number one.
They see that they have to retitle it because they got it wrong the first time. So that lets you know that there's an agenda behind that, but they still tell you that you could use your DNA to trace your origins of where you come from in Africa, brother. It could tell you that you come from there. So my question is this: if we know that part, why is any of your genes similar to those of Africa? If you was already here, that's the part that we leaving out. If let's say we don't got the history, like they said, because that history was stolen. But why is your DNA similar to those in Africa, brother? It shouldn't be.
Gotcha. So we have DNA that's similar to a banana. Did you know that? We have DNA that's similar to dog.
Humans and bananas sharing the same DNA. Y'all heard them. Humans and bananas sharing the same DNA. Now, Tyron made the statement, we have DNA similar to bananas. That's what he said. He said, we have DNA similar to a banana. I want to make sure I say exactly what he said. We have DNA similar to a banana. And this prompts YK the Truth, which shout out to YK the Truth, you know, because he's having this debate with Tyron throughout that video. But YK the Truth, he responds with, we're not talking about that type of similar. But of course, this Urkel voice Negro, Tyron, says, yes, we are talking about it. It's the same thing. Now, YK was referring to the shared genetic patterns and markers between African Americans and Africans. But it's obvious Tyron doesn't understand the difference between DNA and genetics. Well, let's look at what the genetic experts who discovered this shared DNA between humans and bananas had to say on the subject matter. Now, this is taken from the website howstuffworks.com, and it's entitled, Do People and Bananas Really Share 50% of the Same DNA? And I'm quoting this information right here. This piece of info likely originated from a program run by the National Human Genome Research Institute back in 2013. Although other similar data may have been run elsewhere, this particular effort was led by genetics expert Dr. Lawrence Brody. But in an unusual twist, Brody says the experiment was not published as most scientific research is. Instead, it was generated to be included as part of an educational Smithsonian Museum of Natural History video called The Animated Genome. That video noted that DNA between a human and a banana is 41% similar, in quotations. First, it's important to understand the difference between DNA and protein products. Brody says that an easy way to do this is to think of DNA as the blueprint of a house, and protein products as the actual house because all of the information is in there. Then think of human DNA as a blueprint of a ranch home, and banana DNA as that of a colonial style home. In each house, a bunch of things are similar: plumbing, bathrooms, kitchen. But at the end, products are both quite different. That's how it works with humans versus just about everything else, from bananas to chimpanzees. The second thing to keep in mind is that genes, which are the regions of the DNA that code for these proteins, only make up 2% of your DNA. If that's a bit difficult to chew and swallow, here's a more simplified breakdown. Essentially, they took all of the banana genes and compared them one at a time to human genes. From that, they coded a degree of similarity. If the banana had the gene, but the humans didn't, that didn't get counted. About 60% of our genes have a recognizable counterpart in the banana genome. Of those 60%, the proteins encoded by them are roughly 40% identical when we compare the amino acid sequence of the human protein to its equivalent in the banana, Brody adds. It may seem shocking that so many genes are similar in two such vastly different things as person and banana, but actually it's not. If you think about what we do for living and what a banana does, there's a lot of things we do the same way, like consuming oxygen. A lot of those genes are just fundamental to life, Brody says. So when people repeat the percentage as being a similarity of DNA, actually what the research looked at was the similarity of gene products. It's a pretty minor mistake, Dr. Brody reassures. The kernel that you would take home is that we have something in common with a banana and a potato and a pine tree. That part is true. The fine point about the gene products or the DNA, it's easy to see how that would get translated incorrectly. So if a scientist looked at the DNA sequence of a banana and compared it with the DNA of a human, it wouldn't align. You share 50% of your DNA with each of your parents, but with bananas, we share about 50% of our genes, which turns out to be only about 1% of our DNA, emails Mike Francis, a PhD student in bioinformatics at the University of Georgia. Francis adds that humans likely share about 1% of their DNA with other fruits as well. This is because all life that exists on Earth has evolved from a single cell that originated about 1.6 billion years ago, he says. In a sense, we are all relatives. All right, that's claim number one.
Tyrone,
So again, bro, you gotta have the historical context.
If you want the DNA
The
smoke,
article said, hold on, bro.
Don't
Go
run.
back and read that same
run.
paragraph. You gotta have the historical what?
Why the
If you want
evidence
the
gotta
DNA
go
smoke.
one way for us, but not for y'all? Where is the historical evidence?
Exactly.
Your logic is flawed.
Gotcha. How's it flawed? Okay, we got documents of your people. Hold on, we got documents.
Where's the genetic evidence to prove it?
Sean, we have documents. We have documents of Negroes back then. Hold on.
We got documents.
Sean, slow down. Slow down. Slow down.
I'm trying to overtalk you, yo.
Slow down. I'm not over talking anybody. So slow down, brother. Slow down. Because we literally have era Aldrich. We have a load of Equiano. They fabricated a fake African identity.
What? See, you keep on moving the goalposts. Nigga, stay focused.
That's not moving the goalposts.
The article told
That is not. That is not.
Where is your evidence, nigga? Where is that?
Oh, they got educated in the African preschool. They were. Lord Equiano was a godchild to a Jew.
What do you got?
Claim number two. A lot of Equiano fabricated his African origin. Now, I'm going to share this information via Wikipedia. This is taken from a lot of Equiano's Wikipedia page. Following publication in 1967 of a newly edited version of his memoir by Paul Edwards, interest in Equiano revived. Scholars from Nigeria have also begun studying him. For example, S.S. Ogidi identifies Equiano as a pioneer in asserting the dignity of African life in the white society of his time. In researching his life, some scholars since the late 20th century have disputed Equiano's account of his origins. In 1999, while editing a new version of Equiano's memoir, Vincent Coretta, a professor of English at the University of Maryland, found two records that led him to question the former slave's account of being born in Africa. He first published his findings in the journal Slavery and Abolition. In a 2000 conference in England, Coretta defended himself against Nigerian academics like Obiwa, who accused him of pseudo-detective work and indulging in vast publicity gamemanship. In his 2005 biography, Coretta suggested that Equiano may have been born in South Carolina rather than Africa, as he was twice recorded from there, Coretta wrote. And this is what Coretta, who questioned Equiano's African origin, said. Equiano was certainly African by descent. Let me read that again. Equiano was certainly African by descent. The circumstantial evidence that Equiano was also African American by birth and African British by choice is compelling, but not absolutely conclusive. Although the circumstantial evidence is not equivalent to proof, anyone dealing with Equiano's life and art must consider it. According to Coretta, Equiano's or Vass's baptismal record in a naval mustard roll document him as from South Carolina. Coretta interpreted these anomalies as possible evidence that Equiano had made up the account of his African origins and adopted material from others. But Paul Lovejoy, Alexander X. Bird, and Douglas Chambers note how many general and specific details Coretta can document from sources that related to the slave trade in the 1750s as described by Equiano, including the voyages from Africa to Virginia, sailed to Pascal in 1754, and others. They conclude he was more likely telling what he understood as fact rather than creating a fictional account. His work is shaped as an autobiography. Lovejoy wrote that circumstantial evidence indicates that he was born where he said he was, and that in fact, the interesting narrative is reasonably accurate in its details, although of course subject to the same criticisms of selectivity and self-interest distortion that characterizes the genre of autobiography. Lovejoy uses the name of Vassa in his article since that was what the man used throughout his life. In his baptism, his naval records, marriage certificate, and will, he emphasizes that Vassar only used his African name in his autobiography. Other historians also argue that the fact that many parts of Equiano's account can be proven lends weight to accepting his account of African birth. As historian Adam Hochschild wrote, in the long and fascinating history of autobiographies that distort or exaggerate the truth, seldom is one crucial portion of a memoir totally fabricated and the remainder scrupulously accurate. Among autobiographers, both disassemblers and truth tellers tend to be consistent. He also noted that since the rediscovery of Vassar's account in the 1960s, scholars have valued it as the most extensive account of an 18th century slave's life and the difficult passage from slavery to freedom. So, historians don't even agree on if Equiano's African origin was fabricated or not. And even those who do believe so don't have conclusive evidence to say without doubt that he's not African in origin. Not only that, but as you saw, the main historians who questions his African origins do not question if he's of African descent. So either this guy Tyron is incredibly disingenuous or he's just plain ass stupid. And to be honest, I think it's a little bit of goddamn both. It's obvious he picks and chooses what it is that he believes to be true.
Talking about that type of similarity.
Yes, we are talking about it. It's the same thing. All humans have the same DNA.
I'm talking about specific genetic patterns, markers. We're not talking about bananas, that type of DNA. We're talking about genetic markers that only you can share with those that you have a common ancestor with, brother.
Right.
Okay, so
can they tell the context between the black loyalists who were sent over there that had the Indian diaspora DNA? No, they can't. Just like they can't tell the difference between the African.
Now on to his third claim. They can't tell the difference between the African. Now he makes a statement, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know exactly what the fuck he was trying to say. He asked a rhetorical and retarded question of, can they tell the context between the black loyalists that had the Indian diaspora DNA? Which he then says, no, they cannot. First couple of questions I would have asked him is, who are they and where did these black loyalists with so-called Indian diaspora DNA go? Now, these so-called black loyalists with Indian diaspora DNA that he talks about, they don't exist. I'm sorry, but show me proof that these black loyalists with Indian diaspora DNA exist. Because to my knowledge, the black loyalists were a group of enslaved people of African descent who sided with loyalists during the American Revolution. And a significant amount of black loyalists either were evacuated or escaped to British territory at the time in the Canadian province known now today as Nova Scotia, and then later transported to London and the British colonies in the Caribbean. There was a significant amount of these black loyalists who couldn't function in those societies and were given the choice to migrate to the British colony at the time of Sierra Leone. So maybe that's what he was trying to say, but he fumbled that shit. Matter of fact, I'm giving him too much credit. That nigga wasn't trying to say that. No way how he was trying to say that shit. And since we on the topic of DNA, let's talk about us not having to use DNA test kits to conclude that black Americans are descendants of primarily West and West Central Africans. Because there's tons of human genome studies that come to that conclusion without question. It's not even a debate amongst geneticists on where African Americans descend from. It's not. There's not one geneticist that has made the claim that black people are the real indigenous people of America. You got to show me that, because y'all like to use geneticist claims when it comes to DNA test kits, which DNA test kits is a lot different than human genome studies. So since we want to talk about the DNA, I'm going to give you a couple of references you can use to study African American genome. Now, if you just go to Google, type in African American genome sequence, and you'll get countless sources of geneticists stating that African Americans are primarily West and West Central African. For example, according to a 2014 study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics, the average African American genome is 73.2% African, 24% European, and 0.8% Native American. Other studies have found different proportions of African ancestry in African Americans. A 2021 study found that African Americans have the highest median global African ancestry at 82.6%, followed by Puerto Ricans at 19.7% and Mexicans at 3.5%. Also, Harvard Medical School study found that DNA from African Americans buried at an early iron forge in the U.S. indicates that the individuals are descended from a small number of African groups. These groups include the Wolof and Mandinka of Senegambia and the Congo of Central Africa. Most African Americans have the signature of Bantu migration in their genes because they are descended from populations that were affected by it. These can be traced back to actual sources, credited studies. Look it up. Again, go on Google and type in African American genome sequence, which leads me to his last argument on needing historical context. If we want to talk about historical context, let's talk about it, god damn it. Because I'm gonna give you a couple of historical references that gives you context on where we descend from. Historical context number 1, the Wanderer ship. This is a very important historical reference when discussing the transatlantic slave trade. For those who are not familiar, the Wanderer was the last ship to bring enslaved people from Africa to Georgia and one of the last ships to smuggle bondsmen to American soil. On November 28, 1858, the Wanderer arrived at Jekyll Island, where its crew smuggled ashore 409 West African captives. The Wanderer involved real people and places. We know this to be true because during that time period, it was illegal to import Africans to the United States. The ban on the importation of Africans went into effect on January 1st, 1808. Yet because slavery was a lucrative business, people still illegally participated in the smuggling of African people onto the shores of America. And there was a trial that took place involving those responsible for the illegal importation of enslaved Africans to America. It was the United States versus Corey, and it took place on April 19, 1860 in Charleston, South Carolina. You can look this shit up. There's also pictures. Since y'all like pictures, y'all love pictures, and I know pictures can be taken out of context, but I'm gonna break my cardinal rule in providing pictures. But there's pictures of 4 surviving members of the Wanderer. There's even one survivor whose original name was a Congo name. That's right. They had names before they were changed to American names, and one in particular had a Congo name. Now, you can say those pictures can be taken out of context. That's cool. I hear you. But what you can't take out of context is historical figures, accounts of the slave trade when it took place. You can't take these out of context because these comments took place in real time during the period of slavery, and these people actually did exist. For example, there's the 15th president of the United States, James Buchanan, who made a statement during his State of the Union speech speaking directly on the impact of the legal slave trade. And he states, and I quote, "All lawful means at my command have been employed and shall continue to be employed to execute the laws against the African slave trade. After a most careful and rigorous examination of our coast and a thorough investigation of the subject, we have not been able to discover that any slaves have been imported into the United States except the cargo by the Wanderer." Remember the Wanderer, I just spoke about that. There's also W.E.B. Du Bois, which he was real. But there's W.E.B. Du Bois' doctoral thesis to Harvard University entitled "The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America," which was published in 1894. In this thesis, he goes into great detail on the illegal importation of enslaved Africans into the United States well after the ban of the importation of Africans into America. There's also the last known slave ship. There's also the last known slave ship to wreck off the Gulf of Mexico called the Clotilda, which, by the way, the descendants of those last known enslaved Africans who were brought here from Africa to America on the Clotilda still reside in Mobile, Alabama's neighborhood called Plateau, aka Africatown. That's the historical context right there. Now, I can keep going, but when it comes to historical context, I know without a doubt that these Negroes, these delusional pre-K educated Pretendian Negroes, will still have their minds made up. This ain't for them, y'all. This is for logical, sane thinking people. I understand, man, they have too much goddamn hate and colorism that plagues their brain. It plagues their subconscious and their conscious. So they can't accept anything but their conformed and confirmed biases. Last thing I'll say is cultural mental health is real. And y'all need to get help. Call 1-800-SUCK MY AFRICAN yeah on y'all bitch asses. That's all I got. Now, if you'd like to combat that, leave some comments so we can talk about it. And until next time, holla.